Welcome to Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast, Chris Graham, and I got Scott German here with me, and we're going to talk some interesting midsummer news. UVA football practice has already started for 2023, but our eyes are probably on 2024 and beyond as conference realignment fever has picked back up. You know, last couple summers, the news came in more in June and early July, and here we are in early August. And man, it's so much has happened in the last few days. It's hard to keep up. It's Florida State is talking openly about leaving the ACC. We've got Oregon and Washington going from being looked at by the Big Ten to now being invited to accepting the invitations to the Big Ten. Boy, we got Arizona, Arizona State, Colorado, Utah, all headed to the Big 12. The Pac-12, as we know it, is going to no longer exist after this year. And there's potentially news involving Virginia and making a move somewhere. And that's what we're going to try to talk about and get the idea for how all this can affect, because ultimately, Scott, all we care about is how this impacts Virginia. So, for Scott, obviously from Virginia's standpoint, Carla Williams, Jim Ryan can't sit and do nothing. The world is changing rapidly around us, and we've got to make some moves. And, the two obvious ones would be SEC or Big Ten. And it seems like maybe something's going to be happening perhaps in the next few days.
Well, I think you mentioned it yesterday, Chris, that the deadline for schools in the ACC to notify the ACC that they weren't going to be there next year was August 15th. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
So however they go about getting out of the grant of rights, they're going to have to, if that's their intent. Yeah. They have they have 10 days,
10 days from now. Yeah.
And you're right. If Carla Williams and Jim Ryan aren't sitting face to face in an office right now, then something's wrong somewhere.
Hey, Scott, for our podcast listeners, this makes no sense, but for our people who are going to be watching on YouTube, can you adjust your camera down a little bit? Because when you move your head, you're perfect. Because when you move and you talk, you're good. Because when you talk, you're animated, so your face ends up falling out. There, you're perfect now. So
if they're not sitting across from one another in an office somewhere on grounds, then we got a problem, right?
Well, not just those two, but I would think that at least your chair of the board of visitors, your rector, probably some business folks, lawyers, maybe a big Zoom all of a sudden is engaged there. And I'll be honest, Scott, I think you may have multiple Zooms up because you probably have that one. You probably have some folks in a separate one that include other ACC school decision makers, because the Magnificent Seven that we heard about this spring probably needs to be chatting with each other. And then you probably also have whichever conference you're leaning towards working with on a separate one. So, there's a lot, because there's so much going on. Again, the pace of how things have happened this week. Scott, 2 years ago, we were driving back from the ACC football kickoff when we heard the news about Oklahoma, Texas getting ready to head to the SEC, which is not going to happen until next year. Then last year, I think we were heading to the ACC football kickoff when we were talking about the news of USC and UCLA heading to the Big Ten. That stuff has taken a long time. Those moves still haven't happened yet. They've been approved, etc., but they haven't actually moved, and they won't move until next summer. But so much has happened in the last few days, it's hard to figure out what day it is. So I can only imagine how little sleep Jim Ryan, Carla Williams, and people like that are getting right now.
Yeah, and these are decisions that schools like UVA, North Carolina, that are really strong schools in non-revenue sports. Everyone thinks this is about football. Well, it is, but the ramifications go all the way down to the women's field hockey teams.
Oh yeah.
Because if the revenue's not there, those sports are going to eventually suffer. And so these are huge decisions that they have to make. They're not probably going to be easy decisions to make if the ultimate end result is leaving the conference. But if you want to continue that tradition being strong in those non-revenue sports. You've got to find a way to solidify your main source of income, and that right now is football.
So let's stop beating around the bush. The word from the last couple of days has been evolving. Let's just say there were reports, at least some things leaking out as of, I think, Wednesday, when FSU had its board of trustees meeting and its president, its board of regents. I mean, everybody affiliated, it seems like, with Florida State was saying we're leaving. It's just we haven't got a place yet. We're not formally filing papers right this second, but they all but indicated everybody important there said we've got to leave, we've got to go. But there were some reports linking FSU and UVA to the SEC from that day. Now it seems like ESPN's reporting this. I think the Big Ten network itself has been hinting towards this, but ESPN has outright reported it, that the Big Ten is target. So the Big Ten on Thursday morning, the Big Ten chancellors voted to authorize their commissioner to talk with 4 schools, explicitly named were Oregon and Washington, who've now been invited, have accepted the invitation to join next year. So Oregon and Washington were explicitly named. Left unnamed were 2 other schools, but the chancellor said we want to talk with 4 schools. ESPN's reporting, among others, that those other 2 schools are UVA and UNC. This is not surprising. The UVA and UNC have been linked to the Big Ten and vice versa, Big Ten to the UVA and UNC for the past couple of years, as far as having mutual interest. And so I think we can say with some authority that this seems like it's in the works. I will add, now this is not with any authority, but I will just add everything else that's happening in college sports realignment is set to happen July 1st of 2024. So, for example, Oklahoma and Texas formally will join the SEC July 1st of 2024. We know that USC, UCLA, now Washington, now Oregon will be joining the Big Ten as of July 1st of 2024. The new schools headed to the Big 12. The ones I mentioned, Arizona State, Utah, and Colorado will be heading on July 1st, 2024. So whatever's going to happen with UVA, UNC would have to happen by July 1st, 2024, which gets back to the August 15th date, Scott, that you mentioned. To leave, any schools who wish to leave the ACC after the current year have to notify the ACC membership by August 15th of this year. So that's 10 days away. So that says that something has to happen. If it's going to happen with the Big Ten and UVA and UNC, it's got a shelf life of 10 days. Scott, this seems like this is either going to happen, or if it doesn't happen, I mean, I don't know what happens to UVA, UNC, and others who are looking to leave, because I think that the door's open now, but it could close in 10 days, and I don't know what happens if I don't think it opens back up, Scott.
Well, not for Virginia or North Carolina, possibly. Is that
I don't think it opens for any of the Magnificent Seven. I honestly don't. I think if the SEC and the Big Ten, as of August 15th of this year, don't have any ACC members leaping to join, I don't know that they're going to revisit this anytime soon. Those 2 conferences.
Yeah, you're probably right, and there is a sense of urgency. So I want to play.
Okay, Scott, your camera again.
I'm sorry. I want to play devil's advocate with you, Chris, and say, what other than the obvious, the money, the increase in revenue, what would the move to the Big Ten gain Virginia and North Carolina?
Well, it would prevent them. So not only the money that you would get, that would be a benefit, but it would also, it would stop a negative from happening, because at this stage, the Pac-12 may continue in some form. When I say that they're dead, but the Pac-12 as a Power 5 conference no longer exists. It would surprise me if the remnants of the Pac-12, which is now a Pac-4, if they're left with Cal and Stanford, and what would the others be?
Oregon State and
Washington State. Yeah, if those 4 don't invite 6 other members from the Mountain West or somewhere else out there and invite them into the Pac, whatever it will be, they're going to do that. I mean, so there's going to be something called a Pac something that's going to have a ancestral tie to the Pac-10 of old, Pac-8 and Pac-10 of old. But they're not going to be a Power 5. The ACC probably isn't a Power 5 either anymore if things don't change by August 15th of this year, which means because the Big 12 is going, Jim Phillips at the ACC kickoff I was at last week said, we're third. I almost want to say that's our new slogan. We're third, because the SEC and Big 10 are so much further ahead of us revenue wise. If we're not going to be third anymore. The Big 12 has passed us. And we're going to be fourth in a three superpower world. That's not a way to exist. What Scott, I think you alluded to it. I mean, this impacts not just football and men's basketball. It impacts every sport. It goes all the way down to field hockey and whatever else you want to say on the non-revenue side. And so, your non-revenue sports are going to wither on the vine. Your football is certainly never going to improve. Your men's basketball is going to be affected by this. So that's the other side of this. It's not only about let's go out and make more money. It's about, can we just preserve what we've done for all these years to build up our athletics programs to the level they are and not let them just wither on the vine and die?
Yeah, the Power 5 is on life support right now.
Well, the name Power 5, yeah.
The name Power 5. It's going to be a Power 2.
Yeah,
Power
I would put Big 12 up there as a third and a Power 3.
So, yeah, the ACC has to find a way to, and I don't see a way. I think the only way the ACC continues the schools in the ACC is just to go their own way, and I think has been in the works for some time.
It's been in the works. The Magnificent Seven we talked about has been meeting, whether in groups of 2 or 3 or even more, and whether they're meeting in person or virtually, whatever, for several months, addressing this issue. I still think there will be an ACC after. I mean, I honestly, if the Virginias and Carolinas, if the rest of those Magnificent Seven, which include Florida State, Clemson, Miami, Virginia Tech, NC State, if those groups are going to be, those schools and at least one more are going to be making some move, I think, in the next 10 days. It just behooves them from a fiduciary standpoint. If they were for-profit companies, investors would have reason to sue them for lack of fiduciary duty if they don't make a move in the next 10 days, because they're shooting themselves in the foot financially if they don't. But the other schools have to figure out what they're going to do. The other schools being the ones outside of that Magnificent 7+1. They'll do the same thing. I think the Pac whatever will do and invite some other people to join and be part of the quote unquote ACC. But the powers of the ACC need to look out for their own interests. And I think so. It's not just going to be, to me, UVA and UNC. You're going to see Florida State's been blowing smoke. There's fire there. Clemson hasn't been blowing smoke, but that there's interest there as well. I think you're going to see the 7 plus, I don't know who the 8th is, but you're going to see something happen in the next week at least. If not, gosh, I mean, I check my email, Scott. I refresh my email every few minutes because I still think the news could be coming anytime. Something's going to happen. It's going to happen soon. Yeah,
and I read something. You may have read it too. I was trying to find. That's why I look distracted looking on my computer here, but can't. That the ACC, with the athletic directors, were going to have a meeting today.
Okay, I haven't seen that. No, I have not.
And they were going to discuss ways to increase revenue, including expansion. I mean, what a waste of time. Who would they bring in that's going to all of a sudden encourage ESPN to start paying them more money? There's no other schools left now.
Yeah, I'll throw this idea. This is just an idea now. This is not anything reported. This is just speculation. So I'll just couch it that way. But here's what I'll say. I was on the phone earlier today with a college buddy of mine who's he's a very knowledgeable guy. We both went to UVA together. He runs a company in Richmond. Engineering degree, MBA from the University of Richmond. He's a smart fella. And we were talking about Notre Dame. So if you're Notre Dame, right now. Now, Notre Dame, as of last week, oh yeah, we're going to sign our own TV deal, et cetera, et cetera. But Scott, you and I were chatting last night. These TV networks, Fox and ESPN, Fox owns the TV rights to the Big Ten. SEC their TV rights are owned by ESPN. They're going to be demanding, the speculation is, and it's pretty informed speculation, that they're going to be demanding that the conferences that they own these TV rights to aren't going to give them a package of games that includes 3 or 4 non-conference games, the likes of Alcorn State and North Carolina A&T versus Alabama. They're going to be demanding 10 conference games. If you're going to demand that these power conferences schedule 10 conference games, that doesn't give the Notre Dames of the world, and there aren't many Notre Dames left in independent football, the ability to schedule a lot of non-conference games. Right now, Notre Dame plays Michigan every year. They play USC every year. If you're Michigan and USC and you're playing 10 Big Ten games, do you want to play an 11th game against Notre Dame? You probably want to play 2 warm-up games. That's all you can play at this stage. So it gets tough if you're Notre Dame to schedule games. Maybe Notre Dame looks at this now, how things have changed, and says, this landscape has changed since last week. Maybe we need to join the ACC full time. That, to me, Scott, is the only thing that precludes the ACC as we know it from completely breaking up.
Yeah, and what I've read about that scenario is that if these conferences are going to go to 20 teams,
yes,
20 members, there's no way that the networks that are paying these schools millions upon millions of dollars are going to allow them to only play 8 conference games.
Yeah.
They're going to say, if you got a 20 team conference, you got to play at least 10 conference games.
The Pac-12 was already playing 9. I think the SEC stuck at 8. I think the Big Ten was moving to 9, but 10.
It's going to go to 10. And then all of a sudden, the inventory for Notre Dame is going to shrink to nothing. So by default, these Power 2 conferences, or Power 3, if you want to include the Big 12, they're going to box Notre Dame into a situation that, unless Notre Dame wants to play UMass, Army,
Army's in a conference.
Yeah.
Actually, Army and Navy are both in a conference.
Unless they want to play some games that aren't going to be that attractive to Notre Dame, to NBC, and aren't going to be that attractive to get Notre Dame the look that you need to have at the end of the season to qualify for college football playoffs. Notre Dame may be forced to join a conference.
Well, think about this aspect too. Okay, so let's say this meeting you're talking about today, Scott, happens, and it's obviously going to be a virtual meeting. Let's say that that Bubba Cunningham at UNC and Carla Williams at UVA say, all right, if we can't get this situation resolved and we can continue as an ACC, we're going to the Big Ten. And the ACC, thus as we know it, is no longer going to be. Right now, Notre Dame has 5 games with ACC schools to help give it 12 games on the season. If the ACC doesn't exist as that anymore, naturally from a geographic standpoint, the Big Ten has wanted Notre Dame for 40 years, and they just haven't been able to lure them either. If the ACC doesn't exist anymore, where does Notre if the Big Ten is going to be 20 schools and UVA and UNC are 19 and 20, unless the Big Ten kicks somebody out, Notre Dame is not going to be number 21 in a 20-team conference. They might go from being, we're independent and we love our independence to we're independent in everything.
Yeah, to begging someone to pick them up.
Yeah. So
this could be your friend was right. At the 11th hour. The powers that be at Notre Dame may see the handwriting on the wall, and we're not going to have an inventory of games if these conferences go to 10 games. We're going to have to join the ACC, and then the ACC is going to have to make some consolations to Notre Dame to keep their NBC package.
Well, at this point, though, if you're the ACC, why do you give up that leverage point? If you're the ACC and you're saying to Notre Dame, if you're UVA and UNC and you're saying to Notre Dame, we're either going to the Big Ten and making a lot more money, or we're going to stay here and we're going to let you make more money. No, I'm not. If I'm Carla Williams, if I'm Jim Ryan, I'll speak for them because they're our people. They're our UVA people. I'm not letting Notre Dame make $60 million a year. And then we still get stuck with pennies just so we can say Notre Dame's in the conference. We have to make more money too. And I would wonder, this is complete speculation. I would wonder if Notre Dame then joining the league formally as a football member, how that could impact the contract with ESPN, and maybe that opens up an opportunity to make some more money that way. So that's all complete speculation, but I mean, the idea, Scott, no, I had not heard that news that you're talking about there, that the ACC athletics directors will be meeting today. But that, to me, is the only reason they could be meeting today, because dividing up the same small pot of money in a different way is not going to satisfy Florida State. It's not going to satisfy Clemson. It's not going to satisfy UVA and North Carolina. So if it doesn't satisfy those, I mean, Scott, we've got word from the Florida State folks this week. They think that the grant of media rights, which is supposedly so ironclad, is not as ironclad. Their lawyers don't think it's that ironclad. I am getting indications, Scott, that UVA has lawyers who've been combing this thing over, and they're not worried about it either. So worst case scenario, if UVA and UNC just say, and Florida State just says, we're leaving, the rest of you can stay here all as long as you want. We're leaving. We'll pay the $120 million exit fee, and we're not giving you a dime of that grant of rights. $120 million, and then all of a sudden you're making full shares in the Big Ten for UVA, UNC. I would speculate that Florida State would end up in the SEC. Those full shares are going to be worth $50 million more per year in a couple of years. Your donors can figure out a way to pay those exit fees so you can secure your bottom line down the road.
Yeah, I mean, they know that they see the handwriting on the wall, and I don't know what could be on the agenda to be discussed as far as expansion, other than
Notre Dame. Yeah,
who out there? Of any schools out there?
Yeah, there's only school, because at this stage, there's no. I mean, I've been beating the dead horse, it seems like, for a couple of years over SMU, just because SMU's in Dallas, and Dallas is a big TV market, and a big TV market that if you're charging $5 per month for the ACC network, it's a 3 million person TV market. So it'd be worth between $10 and $12 million a year more per school for the ACC if we got the ACC network in Dallas. And that's 10 or 12 million is not anything to sneeze at. If you get SMU in to 10 or 12 million more per year, if Notre Dame has to split up, it has to share its money from NBC, and it brings just the Chicago market to us. There may be, if you add those two up, that may be 30 million a year. We're getting closer to SEC and Big Ten money. But absent something like that, absent getting Notre Dame in as a full football member and then getting SMU in as a full member,
right?
There's getting West Virginia in, getting someone else in, stealing someone from the AAC ain't gonna move the needle. So this meeting ends in one of two ways. It ends with, we're going to have expansion news tonight, or we're going to hear that UVA and UNC, not necessarily tonight, but we're going to hear that UVA, UNC, Florida State, Clemson, at least, they're going to leave the meeting thinking it's time for us to go ahead and move away.
So for the one or maybe two Virginia Tech fans that are watching,
yeah, we feel sorry for you.
Well, yeah, we do in a way, but our scenario last night in our discussion is that Tech should land at a pretty comfortable spot.
In the Big 12, most likely.
More than likely, but there's no guarantee. And so having said that, what changes the scenario that the legislatures in the state of Virginia don't try to block Virginia moving without taking Tech along with them?
Well, one, the legislature isn't in session, so then the legislature has nothing to do with this. That question comes from a position of good history. So you're bringing up a great point. The reason Virginia Tech's in the ACC is because Mark Warner, then the governor, now U.S. Senator from Virginia, leveraged a vote in his favor. And the vote he leveraged was back in 2004 when the ACC was looking to expand from 9 at that stage. Excuse me, I'm coughing too. From 9 at that stage, there was the desire to go to 12. And at that time, I think it was Miami, Boston College, and Syracuse were on the table. But at the time, with 9 members, you needed 7 votes to expand the conference. And of the 9 at that time, Duke and North Carolina were adamant they did not want to expand the conference. And so that was 7-2. You had 7, but Mark Warner wanted Virginia Tech in the ACC. And so he instructed John Castine, then the president of UVA, to say, I will not vote for expansion if we don't replace one of the schools that's being considered for expansion with Virginia Tech. And so Boston College, Miami, and Virginia Tech were added. Syracuse wasn't added for 10 years. Syracuse got left on the wayside there, and it was 2014 when they finally entered the league. And so that's why Virginia, the state of Virginia, the government of Virginia was able to leverage getting Virginia Tech in. It was because of that quirk of if UVA doesn't vote for Virginia Tech to come in the league, we will not vote for anybody to come in the league. There's not the same kind of situation now going with this. Virginia is on its own. See, at that time, a president of a university serves at the leisure of the Board of Visitors. The Board of Visitors is appointed by a governor. At this stage, the Board of Visitors that runs UVA, the president that works for him, there's no political pressure to bring Virginia Tech along with them because there's really no leverage point to do that with. So Virginia Tech's on its own. And, and when I say this, Whit Babcock has been a member of this Magnificent Seven. He's been in these discussions with Carla Williams, the other athletics directors, all these past several months. So none of this is going to be a surprise to any of the members of this group. They probably, I assume, this is all assumptions at this stage, but my assumption is if Virginia and UNC are this close, they've got an offer, and lots of people are reporting that UNC and UVA have an offer from the Big 12, from the Big 10 to join. That the other schools in that Magnificent Seven have their own offers, and they're just waiting for the buttons to be pushed to be able to take those offers.
Yeah, I think I had read, and I did find something that the Magnificent Seven included Clemson, Florida State, Miami, North Carolina State, Virginia, and Virginia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of from what I read is that they banded together, but they would not act upon anything until there was a landing spot for all 7 schools.
Right.
Well, it now seems with the FSU pushing the agenda pretty far up in this past week, that it's clear that all 7 schools have a reasonable assurity that they have a landing spot.
Yeah, for them to come out so publicly and so vociferously with what those folks are saying, and we're talking about, again, the president, the board of trustees there. There was unanimity on the part of the leaders of Florida State. We need to leave the ACC. That them going that route, going the nuclear route, that's the button is being. It kind of feels like a slow motion button being pushed. Like we're still in the throes of the full depress of the button, the finger on the button, and we're just kind of waiting to see what happens when the detonation happens. And I don't think we're there yet. I think there's smoke. That means there's fire somewhere. I just don't know when and where we're going to finally find the source of the fire. But Florida State, they've got to have their landing spots already picked out. And I think that it just happens that, we're talking about this because we've got all these reports about UVA and UNC being formally in the crosshairs, formally behind the scenes in the crosshairs of the Big Ten. We just don't know with certainty the other destination spots for the other schools. And also, so we keep talking about a Magnificent Seven. I've had questions. In fact, the man I was talking with, my college buddy, was asking, so how does this happen? How do we not pay an exit fee? How do we not have to worry about the grant of rights? Well, one scenario for this where there'd be no exit fee potentially would be if 8 members, which would be a majority of the 15, vote to leave the ACC. the grant of media rights goes away. So that's and the grant of media rights is important. I know we're talking about this, and people listening probably have a general idea of what grant of media rights means. Effectively, it's the money that you get paid for your rights to the broadcast of your home games. Now, that would include everything down to field hockey, but obviously for the most part, it means football and men's basketball. Those are the sports that make money. So the amount of money that's worth per school is about 40 million per year. That's an approximation, 35 to 40 million. Of course, that will increase with inflation over the years. But from the standpoint of where you're at now, we're in 2023. The contract with ESPN and the ACC runs through 2036. 40 million per year for 13 more years is over $500 million that you would not have access to. Essentially, if UVA and UNC left for the Big Ten, had to pay $120 million exit fee, and then could not make $40 million per year from the broadcast of their home games, that would cost the schools in the end about $600 million if nothing else was negotiated. Of course, in contracts, everything can be negotiated, but if the grant of media rights goes away, if 8 schools say we are breaking the media rights deal, we're breaking this deal with ESPN, we're leaving the conference, that goes away. Everything I've seen from a legal standpoint, all the legal analysts who weighed in say that goes away. You may still owe the exit fee, but you would not owe. You would claw back your media rights, and then you can make money whatever conference you went to afterwards from your home game broadcast. So that's what's at stake here. And it could be that the $120 million exit fees at stake here too. We don't know. I don't know that schools leaving will completely get out of this scot-free. I assume that the other 7 or how many ever members would be left, I still assume they would want to maintain some semblance of ACC and then maybe invite some lower level JMUs or ODUs or Appalachian States or something like that to be part of the ACC down the road and maintain a name ACC. But yeah, the grant of media rights can be broken with a majority leaving the conference. That's every legal analyst I've read opine on that has said that. So that's what's at stake here, is basically $500 million over the next 13 years.
Yeah, and I'm reading an article about, so the Magnificent Seven was created in May of this past year. May.
Well, it was discovered in May.
Discovered, yes.
They had been meeting and talking with each other for months leading up to that. We only found out about them in May.
So I'm just paraphrasing the article I'm reading. It said they had lawyers looking for loopholes in the grant of rights, and apparently the 7 schools have decided that the grant of rights would dissolve if half of the member institutions left at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, 7 is not half of 15.
But 7's half of 14.
If you don't consider Notre Dame.
Right. So that's a question too then.
But if Notre Dame does leave for all other sports, then 8 is half of 15.
I wonder though if Notre Dame has that motivation, just with what I laid out there. If the ACC ceases to exist, where do they go? Or if the ACC if they leave, where do they go? So if they vote
in
to
football,
leave,
they would just go back to being independent. But again, they've got that 1,000-pound pink elephant in the corner of the room.
And if they leave the other sports, where do they go? Where do those other sports go? They don't go to the Big Ten.
Where's their basketball program go? Maybe to the Big East. I don't know.
Maybe Big East, yeah, and then they could stay independent in football, yeah, because the Big East is at this stage is a non-football conference.
So we had a little fun last night. So the Magnificent Seven, we've decided that Clemson, Florida State, and Miami would go to the Southeast Conference,
which would then need to add one more to get to 20.
Maybe in a 4th from the ACC, like an NC State, maybe a Virginia Tech.
I would throw Georgia Tech in there.
Or Georgia Tech
too. Yeah. I mean, just as a possibility. Yeah.
Certainly improve their academics.
Well, in academics, and also you would sew up Georgia. They already have Georgia with the Georgia Bulldogs in Athens, but if you get the Atlanta TV market and you basically say to the rest of the college sports world, Georgia is ours. Because if you leave Georgia Tech out there and someone else comes and snaps them up, whether it's even if the ACC just stays around, Georgia Tech is an interesting, intriguing possibility there. So that's let's throw those for argument's sake. Let's throw those 4 into the SEC. We got some others left over.
Virginia, North Carolina to the Big Ten,
Yes.
and Tech to the Tech and NC State to the Big 12.
And then it leaves interesting what happens. So the other ACC members that are, because we've already thrown we pulled Georgia Tech out of the non-Magnificent Seven and thrown them in the SEC as a possibility. Then you've got, where do Duke and Wake go? The other 2 Carolina schools. And then Syracuse, Pitt, Boston College, Louisville is still sitting out there. I mean, so geographically, so if you're looking at the Big 12, I think you threw out NC State, Virginia Tech, the Big 12 would need a couple more schools. Pitt could be interesting there.
Louisville,
But Pitt, West Virginia as a rivalry. Then you'd have West Virginia, Virginia Tech as a rivalry in the Big 12. Those would be really interesting, especially football games. Louisville is kind of a perfect bridge.
Louisville would be matched with Cincinnati already.
Right.
Well, so
yeah,
those are good. Those are good fits, and those are good landing spots. Maybe not the revenue that they would get from the SEC or the Big Ten, but certainly more than they're going to get from remaining in a absolutely crippled ACC.
Right, because the ACC at this stage becomes sort of like the Big East is now. You know, the Big East 30 years ago was a thriving football and basketball conference, but it's now just a basketball conference. The ACC, if everyone leaves that we're talking about, which is a distinct possibility, it could happen as soon as today, based on what we're hearing from Scott talking about this meeting that's going to be happening today. The ACC, if you're left with Duke and Wake and Georgia Tech and Virginia Tech, NC State, I mean, you know, the schools, well, and Pitt and Syracuse and Boston College, that's a losing lineup.
And you know, Chris, I was thinking of, what happens to Duke? What happens to Wake Forest? And late last night, I was watching the Big Ten network, and they were like wall-to-wall coverage all day. And they had Nicole Auerbach, and they discussed the adding of Washington and Oregon, right?
Yes.
And to get to 18 and then the potential of getting to 20. And they mentioned possibly Cal, Stanford, or 2 ACC schools, unnamed, which we're assuming would be Virginia and North Carolina. And then later they got the host asked, what happens to the Dukes and the Wake Forest? And Nicole, who I really like and respect, she cut to the chase. She said, unfortunately, no one cares.
Yeah.
Because football is driving this bus, and Wake and Duke are very small private schools.
Yeah.
And they are non-factors in this. Now,
that's
a great basketball program, but
they both been winning in football the last few years, but it's not about winning. It's about those stadiums that aren't full, the small stadiums they can't fill up.
And what the state brings, I mean, we talked about Virginia, 9 million people. That's got to be lucrative to the Big Ten.
The math I did on this, Scott, it's back of the envelope. Actually, I don't even have an envelope. It's just in the air math in my head. 9 million Virginia residents translates to about 3 million households, TV households, right? And Carolina is a similarly sized state. I think they're about 8.5 million. Let's just say 2.5 million households, just for the sake of argument. 5.5 million households between those two states for the Big Ten. The Big Ten network charges $8 per month to cable subscribers to be able to access the Big Ten network. I don't watch the Big Ten network right now, and it's when I say that, they charge $8 to TV subscribers in the states in which Big Ten schools are housed. We live in Virginia, Scott, both of us, so we don't pay $8 per month because we don't have a Big Ten school in our state. We pay a lot less per month. If all of a sudden the Big Ten network has a Virginia school and then a Carolina school in it, you're getting your cable bill goes up a little bit, or whatever happens there. $8 per month times 5.5 million households. That's $44 million a month. That's $484 million a year for the Big Ten. Divide that by 20. That's $24 million per year per school. that the Big Ten benefits by being in Virginia and North Carolina. Then from the standpoint of if Virginia and North Carolina are in the league, they've got the West Coast ties with the LA market. They've got then, places in Oregon and Washington. They've got Chicago with Northwestern. You could consider the DC TV market sewn up because they got Maryland and Virginia. Back when Maryland and Virginia were both in the ACC, DC was ours. Now we split the allegiances, but if Virginia and Maryland are back in the same conference, DC is ours. You've got Tobacco Road with North Carolina. We have been to how many ACC tournaments, Scott? That stadium, whatever stadium, whether it's Greensboro or Charlotte, when Carolina is playing in the ACC tournament, every section is Carolina blue except for the section of the team that they're playing. Carolina, the state of North Carolina is UNC sports. Yes. The other three ACC schools have a trickle of fans, and then it's everybody else is North Carolina fans. So, from a business standpoint, the Big Ten surpasses the SEC if UNC and Virginia join the Big Ten.
Yeah, I agree. And we're just going to have to get used to going to the ACC football kickoff in Chicago, which is not a bad thing.
Hey, there's a direct flight from Charlottesville now. They just announced that this week. So as long as we can keep that going, right?
Yeah, spending a couple of days in the Windy City is you got a good chance we can catch a ball game.
Hey, there's two teams. There's two.
One of the two is going to be at home, and they both suck. So it doesn't.
That's okay. Yeah, there's plenty of seats, but no, and we were even talking about this last night, Scott. So I think we could share this out loud. If assuming all this happens, as we think it very well may, you were asking me about, okay, so how does this impact football attendance? Because obviously, from a basketball standpoint, man, UNC and Virginia coming into the Big Ten hasn't won a national championship in this century yet, but UNC 2017, Virginia 2019, we go in and we're probably the premier programs in basketball right away. We're at least on that. We're going to be
in the upper 4 or 5 teams.
Yeah, we're in the top. We are in the top tier, and I think we're the top 2 teams in the conference, but we're there, somewhere in that range. From a football standpoint, all right, right now, we can't sell football tickets to save our lives at Virginia because the team is struggling, obviously. Even when we had a good year, 2019, we still couldn't fill the stadium up. The first few years of a potential joining the Big Ten in football. All right, so one of those years, Ohio State will probably come to Charlottesville. One of those years, you'll see Michigan in Charlottesville. One of those years, you'll see Michigan State in Charlottesville. One of those years, you'll see USC in Charlottesville. So even if the football program's still working its way up again, we'll fill the stadium up just because we're not playing Duke and Georgia Tech and Boston College at home. We're playing some schools that fans are going to say, hey, okay, Virginia's playing and we're not that good, but man, I want to see Ohio State play. So that can be a bridge to us, put butts in seats. Maybe we sneak an upset in one of those games as we're hopefully improving, getting better, etc. And in the meantime, I think it's a natural that we'll sell more tickets the first few years of entering the Big Ten because of the novelty of it all. So I think from a business standpoint, the Big Ten, this makes sense. A business standpoint of UVA, this makes a lot of sense.
I don't know if off the top of your head, you're familiar with our home football schedule this year, which
I'm unfortunately a little too familiar. Yeah.
Which is not really great.
It's not great. No.
But I just, while we were talking, played with, if we did accept membership into the Big Ten in a couple of years, you could have this as, assuming that we play, the Big Ten does go to a 10-game schedule, right?
Yeah.
Like we're suggesting the networks are going to demand.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's say we play 6 home, 6 away. We could have a home schedule that includes, and I'm not going to throw all the big name teams in, but we could have a home schedule that includes Ohio State, Purdue, Michigan State, North Carolina, Virginia Tech as your non-conference game, right? We'll still play Tech. I would
Right.
assume.
I would assume we would try to negotiate a home and home with them. Yeah.
Um, Nebraska.
Penn
Now,
State.
if you're the ACC, if you're in the UVA ticket office, you're going to
Yeah.
be drooling at that.
Oh yeah.
You,
And you'll probably get.
and we're not going to continue. I mean, this year's team would struggle mightily, but this year's team might struggle mightily in the Sun Belt Conference.
That's
So
right. That's
I
right.
can't think that this would not help. This would elevate recruiting.
It would. Oh God, yeah. Oh God, it would elevate recruiting. It would get the donors excited. It would get the potential season ticket buyers excited. Yeah, and also, hey, right now, Virginia and Virginia Tech both, and of course, so I'll bring Virginia Tech into this. We're both paying our head football coaches less than what Liberty's paying its head football coach. That's the economic reality we're in right now. You go to the Big Ten and get some Big Ten money starting to flow through the coffers. Whether it's Tony Elliott, hope and God, I'm rooting for him to do well. I know this year is going to be awful. I've been very critical for lots of reasons, but I want it to be Tony Elliott because he's a superhuman being, and I think he's a knowledgeable football coach, and God love him. So let's just say Tony Elliott. Okay, so right now he's making about $4 million a year. Let's say he does get things going in a couple of years, and his contract comes up, and he wants to re-sign, and we want to re-sign him. We're not paying him less than Liberty's coach when he gets the program back in order. We're paying him Big Ten money to be the football coach, and so right now, I mean, if you stay in the ACC and he gets Virginia back, the first thing you got to think is who's going to poach him from us, and so I mean, having that extra $50 million a year is going to raise all boats. It's going to make it so that the lacrosse coaches make more money, have a bigger recruiting budget. You're Brian O'Connor in baseball. We go to the Big Ten, assuming this happens. We go to the Big Ten, and we're the heavyweight in the baseball in the Big Ten. We go right away. Us and Carolina define that conference right away. You're every program there. The coaches have more recruiting budget. The student athletes have better strength and conditioning budgets. I mean, everything about this gets better. And it's or you stay where you are.
It's a no-brainer.
It's a no, or you stay where you are and things wither. I mean, it's not like it goes away tomorrow, but we fight a battle, and we're constantly losing ground every day, every month, every year. And I'll say this about the University of Virginia. I'm an alum. Scott, you have been on ground since you were a kid, so we're both lifers here. UVA doesn't do things half-ass. Carolina doesn't do things half-ass. And right now it feels like because we're stuck with the ACC, we're doing things half-ass, and it just seems it's a no-brainer. This feels like it's going to be happening soon.
I'm not sure whether it was you and I talking, or I had dinner last night with after I went to the UVA open football practice yesterday and had dinner with Jerry Ratcliffe, and we were talking, and I think it was Jerry, maybe both of you. I said, I kind of feel sorry in a way, because if once all these expansions are done, what's going to happen to the Liberties and the JMUs that have spent all this money upgrading their stadiums, and Liberty has upgraded their stadium? They're paying their coach more than Virginia Tech and Virginia are paying their coaches. What's going to happen to all those programs? And then I got to thinking, if Virginia doesn't act, we're going to be one of those schools.
Yeah.
And we're going to probably end up in a conference with JMU and Liberty.
Right.
That's how this is going to go. So,
or a conference
or
a conference at the level of JMU and Liberty. No offense to those.
No, there's absolutely no offense, because we played JMU this year, and they could very well take us to the woodshed.
JMU, I think they might, but if the ACC doesn't advance, and we're stuck in the ACC, we might as well be the Sun Belt or Conference USA.
And there's a reason that the Big Ten wants UVA, not just for athletics, but UVA would bring would fit their profile of very high academic schools as well.
Academically, culturally, athletically, UVA and UNC are both really good fits, obviously great fits for the Big Ten. And that's why there's been, all this romance for the last couple of years, and all the talk and speculation in the media, and apparent interest on the part of the Big Ten. I mean, it's been made pretty clear that there is an offer on the table, and it's now in the hands of UVA and UNC to act upon that offer. And so that's what we can report to you here as we're probably kind of wrapping up here, boy. This has been fun, Scott.
I have a question.
Okay, quick question. Yeah.
I think I read this or saw it maybe on TV. Originally, wasn't the concept of conferences created so schools could share academics, research, academic resources? I mean, even 50, 60 years ago.
Oh, well, conferences date back. You remember the ACC and SEC both came out of the old Southern Conference. That was a 30-team conference that stretched from Mid-Atlantic all the way to Texas. I'll be cynical and say, to me, the academic side of this is the appendage, not the athletic side of this. I mean, yeah, there are lots of relationships between schools. And one reason Mark Warner was pushing for Virginia Tech to be included in the ACC back in 2004 the way he did was to increase the potential for the academical collegiality of Virginia Tech with ACC schools, and that certainly has benefited Virginia Tech. Virginia Tech, as a school, has made really substantial improvements in growth in the last roughly 20 years because of its relationships with. I mean, UVA is an obvious one. They're in state, but there have been some relationships forged academically between Virginia Tech and some of the Carolina schools, et cetera. So there is an aspect of that, but that's why Virginia and Carolina are both great fits with the Big Ten. The Big Ten makes a requirement of admission that you're a member of the American Association of Universities, which is a very prestigious group of roughly 60 or so schools that have the highest academic standards in the country, public universities and private that have the highest academic standards in the country. And Virginia and Carolina are both members of that group, the AAU. So it would definitely be a benefit to both Virginia and Carolina as academic institutions to have those relationships. But it's not to say that, Virginia and Carolina having relationships with schools like Duke and Wake Forest are not a benefit too. So, and, in this standpoint, you got to look out for your bottom line. And, Virginia and Carolina both rank in the top 30 nationally in terms of their athletics revenues each year. But, that's at threat with the changes that have just happened in the last couple of days, and your ability to continue to field competitive teams is at risk. And then thus college sports, Scott, exist not to make money because they end up paying their bills at the end of the year. They exist to market your school. And if you're not competing well on the playing field, that's not going to market your school very well. And so that's what they're looking. That's the absolute bottom line here. It's not even about the money. It's about the ability. College sports exist so that on Saturdays, when people are either in the stadium or watching on TV, mostly for the watching on TV part, you see the University of Virginia presented in a positive light for 3 or 4 hours on Saturdays. And then in basketball season, a couple hours on Wednesday night and, Saturday afternoon or whatever else. It's a positive reinforcement of, hey, UVA is a great place. Your kid should apply to go here. And if you're in a second tier conference and you're not winning games, that's not going to present you in that positive light that you're playing the games for. So that's what it all comes down to.
Yeah, I heard or read that college athletics was the front door to the university. To the general public. And any realtor will tell you, if you're selling your home, if you want to promote your home, you got to have a nice looking front door.
Even D3 schools.
Yeah, absolutely.
They don't put the money into it at the level that the D1 schools do, the Power 5 schools do, but Bridgewater College puts out a pretty good football team every year up here in our neck of the woods.
Right up to Winchester, and look what Shenandoah University is doing.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean,
They understand that importance.
If you're putting a team on the field, you're trying to win, and this is the way you're trying to win so that the alums can feel good. They write checks when they feel good about things, and then they come back to school every so often and watch a game. They can brag to their friends, hey, Bridgewater won this game, or Shenandoah won this game, Washington Lee won that game. And then kids apply to those schools, and the cycle continues. And that's what this is all about. You got to look, if you're Carla Williams, if you're Jim Ryan, if you're the UVA Board of Visitors, if you're any athletics director, president, or Board of Visitors member at any school, you got to be looking out for those interests. And that's where this is going. So we're wrapping this up just so that the people who are listening to this know, or watching this know. It's just after 12 o'clock on Saturday. I say that because the news in this is happening like every hour. So we may have to come back, Scott, today or tomorrow, or certainly sometime very soon, to address whatever the latest developments are. But we will be ready to do that. Any other closing thoughts, Scott, as we're wrapping up here?
No, Chris, it's certainly, this isn't the dog days of August for or it may be weather-wise, but it's not news-wise. And who knows, maybe this time next year we'll be gearing up for the first game of the season to the big house.
That's right.
Or to the horseshoe.
When Scott and I connected yesterday, we said, hey, Scott's covering football practice. Let's talk about UVA football. Yeah, okay. We've talked about a lot of stuff, not any football. We may have to talk about that some next week too. For Scott German, I'm Chris Graham signing off. And again, hey, if you listen this far, we might have some updates for you pretty soon. So please check us out. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day.